Nightreign is an interesting entry from one of the biggest developers out there. A complete departure from their single-player RPGs that brought us the much-loved or hated Soulslike tag. Few can say they've carved out their own subgenre, but those games were so defining they did. And FromSoft have been able to ride that same formula for over a decade. Dark Souls 1 and 3, masterpieces. Dark Souls 2, a diamond in the rough. Bloodborne, please, just bring it to PC already. But another masterpiece. Sekiro, Elden Ring, you get the idea. All following the same formula. Excellent boss design, all wrapped up in obscure and interesting worlds begging to be explored. When Nightreign was announced, I, like much of the community, was hyped. Multiplayer Elden Ring. I mean, I played the co-op mod, that was so much fun, but a roguelike? From a developer that has been focused on single-player experiences with a sprinkle of very optional multiplayer, I was worried it would be a little jank. And Nightreign really confirmed my expectations while also subverting them. I'll say up front to cut through my back and forth, Nightreign is a good game. And I mean, just good. And I think the biggest issue this game faces is that it comes from a developer that releases top-tier excellent games. They release masterpieces. So as Nightreign limply walks into the same bar alongside its predecessors, you really start to see the cracks in the foundation of this developer and their difficulties in adapting their material. Nightreign is both an interesting step forward for them, and I want to say I'm glad this game exists, but it feels heavily undercooked in some areas. With the vast majority of content being reused, many people in the community feel like they've been served last night's leftovers, and that has left a bad taste in their mouths. And I struggle to disagree, despite this not ruining my enjoyment of the game. I mean, leftovers can be great, but you don't usually want to pay for them a second time, or in this instance, pay for it in a different format. I didn't hate seeing old bosses return, but when fighting another dragon I fought 100 times, or an ulcerated tree spirit or fire monk, I did occasionally wonder why they decided to simply mash some of their games together without evolving much of it. The roguelike mechanics themselves are done well enough. The weapons and consumables in the world make sense. The upgrade options on defeating bosses keeps runs feeling versatile, but I never felt particularly challenged. In adapting their world to meet the 3-man formula, I think they did struggle to make the game world challenging for 3-man teams. Now, I definitely had my fair share of defeats, but of the 8 final bosses, I was able to take down 4 of them on the first try with random groups. First trying a Souls boss is usually a mark of honor and something to celebrate, but at times it felt a little too formulaic as I or my allies were able to sit back launching salvos of missiles while the boss aimlessly chased someone else. This feels like an intern's passion project rather than a true FromSoftware release. Like someone thought this would be a great idea, but didn't fully understand how to develop the roguelike elements fully, and it's this I keep getting stuck on. The game plays and feels good in my view. I do think it's a lot of fun, maybe slightly unbalanced, but I can't help but feel like it was hastily thrown together and not given the same amount of love and passion their prior games all clearly received, which is never a good sign. Nightreign succeeds because of those excellent boss and combat systems that they have been slowly building upon for the last 16 years. The Night Lord Enderrun bosses are all versatile and excellently designed. Some of the most fun I've had in the series, and they're all brand new, which is nice. But there's only 8 of them in total. I've technically finished Nightreign in just under 20 hours. It feels wrong to say that. And after beating the final boss, I was a little taken back that we only received 8 truly new boss fights in a small recycled world. And I don't think they leaned into the team dynamics as heavily as they could have. Only one boss made me feel as though we needed to work as a team to take it on. Nightreign manages to keep up with solid sound design, enemy design, and their ability to transition Limgrave into this roguelike world has been quite successful. But it's also all content I've experienced, just in a different package. The world feels good to traverse through their new movement options, but there were times where I was literally following the same path I'd just followed through the world, which didn't help that feeling with this having all been done before. And this is one of the biggest issues with the game. Roguelikes are fun because they offer different challenges to you each time. You will repeat content, but in new ways, and this helps keep the game fresh. When you start by recycling content, you lose some of that fresh feeling. Yes, I'm not replaying matches exactly the same, but I've seen this world. I've seen these enemies and I've seen these bosses. So it's cool to see them for the first time in Nightreign, but it very quickly loses that magic where other roguelikes can hold that attention longer because all of it is new. And having beaten all the Night Lord bosses, I'm not feeling much desire to continue on after 20 hours, which is less than I would have spent in any of their other previous titles. Their relic system, which provides 3 permanent upgrade slots to fill between matches, to me felt underwhelming. I'd just thrown on whatever I had on hand. Sometimes I forgot to put anything on, but when I've beaten all the bosses with poor to average gear, why would I farm for higher tier relics? Nightreign is really missing an X Game Plus or higher difficulty tier to really put players to the test, and again, limits that replayability. In some instances, I'd be dropping into the same location, fighting the same boss, and following very similar paths through the world. For a roguelike, I do wish they had introduced additional maps. They had the entire world of Elden Ring to play with, and given they brought bosses over from the Souls series, why did we not receive some nostalgic options of locations from those games? Just imagine if they'd given us an Anor Londo-inspired map, or a Cathedral of the Deep. This could have been their best of FromSoftware moment. A nostalgic walk back through their previous titles, all in one package with some revamped animations as they did for the returning bosses like the Nameless King. They decided to bring over the past bosses, but drew the line at level design? It just all feels kind of off. But by all accounts, it is a good game. If I had to rate it, I'd give it around a 7 out of 10. Again, good, but not really mind-blowing. And that is what keeps nagging at me, is that they had the option. They could have created a couple more maps. Hell, just give us Caelid. Give us the Altus Plateau. Bring back some more basic enemies from the Souls series. Not just a few bosses here and there. It feels like these options were all on the table, begging to be picked up. This could have been bigger, better, and still leaned on reused content in a more meaningful way. I mean, they're already butchering the lore, so just run with it, right? But they just messed around with Limgrave and called it a day? And it just feels like wasted potential, which I think is where a lot of the community sentiment is sitting, and certainly has been for me. It's the idea that's left me with a mixed reception of the game. It is a good game, but more could have been done and almost should have been done. I don't really know where to sit with that. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are in relation to this. For me, I do really like this game, but I kind of expected a little bit more. As I've said, I would recommend it, especially if you have 2 other friends also wanting to jump in. There is a lot to enjoy here, and this is where a lot of subjective views will come in, so I can understand entirely those who will disagree with me. The Soulsborne Ring games have always been a matter of taste. They're not for everyone, and that's understandable. Fighting the Nameless King again was a joy in multiplayer, and to see the slightly different attack patterns kept it relatively fresh. I also played most of the game with random groups, and I only had a couple of matches in which people left or failed to work together, but the lack of voice communication can be noticeable, and in a game with a time limit, each match, this will lead to some people getting frustrated. I think what I'm trying to say here is that your mileage will vary significantly. If you like the Souls games, it's hard to argue you won't like this, but it does feel like it's slightly lower quality just in the amount of content you're receiving. The obscure nature of the world, of item descriptions, of game systems, it's harder for me to swallow in this package. I don't mind their style of storytelling, and that you need to often engage with the system to fully understand it, but it's so obtuse in Nightreign, it did frustrate me at times, and this is coming from somebody that has played all of their previous titles more than once. I'll give you a quick example of that. In one instance, I found a relic that allowed my Recluse, the mage character, to gain Terra Magica whenever I gained elemental affinities. To understand what that meant, I had to go check the character selections to understand what the elemental affinities were on the mage, and then I also had to go and check the codex to understand what Terra Magica was. It's not bad design, but it's showing its age, where most modern games would have given you the quality of life to provide a brief explanation of what Terra Magica did on the relic. Or another relic description that told me I'll have increased attack power for completing Everjails. Again, this sounds great, but when I'm trying to build a character in a game, I kind of want to know how much attack power that is. Am I going to be doing an extra 25 or 50 damage for each jail, which would make it very worthwhile? Or am I going to be doing an extra 5? There is a little explanation here, so you're forced to search for this through multiple menus. In Elden Ring, that's kind of okay, because you can go around, kill a couple of basic enemies, and figure it out for yourself. In Nightreign, where you have a time limit and people expecting you to keep up, it's harder to justify. Look, I know I've been pretty harsh on the game here. I don't hate it by any means, and I don't dislike FromSoftware as a company. They're actually one of the few I respect. And Nightreign is a fun time. It's enjoyable. If you play the other games and think you'll enjoy it, you almost certainly will. It's hard to critique a new game when you've already played 80% of the content in a different format and praise it for being groundbreaking, because it isn't quite that. It is a good representation of how a roguelike formula can be implemented in games we hadn't seen prior, and it has been really successful here. Just not quite as successful as we'd expect from this developer. Thank you so much for checking out this video. It's been a bit of a weird one for me. I've really enjoyed Nightreign, would highly recommend it, but there's just something missing. And I think it's the breadth of content. I think they've cut some corners here where they really could have made this another masterpiece if they just pushed themselves a little bit further. But hey, it is a different game director, so we can't hold it against Miyazaki. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments below. I expect to see a lot of disagreement down there, and I welcome it, so let me know your thoughts. Otherwise, thanks again for watching. Throw a like on the video if you've enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more gaming content, and come hang out in my streams every Tuesday and Thursday, 4 PM Australian Western Standard Time, right here on YouTube and Twitch. Until then, guys, have a good one, and I'll see you later. Cheers.